Hello, just wanted to do a quick live stream, show you guys something I learned. I think it's pretty important. Some tips for using inline functions with hooks. I just ran into this problem myself. I feel like I've learned it a couple of times, but I thought it'd be good to solidify it with you guys. So let's dive into some code. So here I have just a really basic hook called useInput. And it just sets up some handlers that you can just apply straight to like an input. So you say use input, and then it gives you a function you can call that returns these props like on change and value. So one thing that I was running into, and also we can set like a default value right here. Default value, hello. So it starts off as hello. And we can change it and it updates. So as with a lot of hooks like this, user input, you might want to like listen to the changes that are happening on this input outside of here. There would be a couple of ways we could do that. Like we could do something like an input and say like on change and actually override the on change and pass it through as like a prop. That's totally fine. I think a way that I'm going to show you right now is we could just add that on change listener like right here. So say when this input hook is changing, we just want to like get the value and console log the value. We'll open our console here so we can see it. And then we're going to use that on change up here. So we'll get that on change, and we have some stuff set up right here. So there's React state, use state that's happening right here, just so we can track the internal state. Our change handler is triggering this handle on change function, and we have wrapped it in use callback because we don't want to we want to memoize that function unless set value changes. And set value really is never going to change, and that's fine. So anytime that the value changes, we're going to add it so that if on change, like if this on change function is present, we want to call it with the value that we're getting. Perfect. So right now it's working, it's working just fine because we've just said we want it to console log this value. Now, what if we had two inputs? Let's do this. Let's do input 2. We'll say input 2. The default value of this one is going to be foo. This one's going to be bar. On the second input right here, so let's see, we can still log it just fine. On the second one, though, this on change, what we want to do is we want to log the value of the first input. So we're going to say, like, let's do this right in here. We'll say const first value equals input value. And we're going to log the first value plus the second one. So the first one's logging just fine right here. But if we come to the second one, okay, you can see something funny is happening right here. It's still logging foo when it should be logging tanner tanner. It's logging foo tanner. Now there's a reason for this. Is because when we instantiated this input and we gave it this on change function right here, or sorry, when we instantiated this input with the default value of foo, and then we did this one, and we said the on change function for the input 2 is this function right here. And it calls input and gets the value from that input. Well, what happens is when we go inside of our hook, this on change function gets closed over the very first time. when set value gets defined, this function right here kind of gets locked in time with the values that it was given from when set value changed. So this onChange function right here, it never updates. It's always pointing to that very first input that was given back from this one right here. And that's because we're not updating this function when onChange changes. So what if we were to do that? If we were to put onChange right there, well, technically it's working now, but we have a problem. And this problem might not be very obvious at first, but what we're doing is we have now set a memoization on onChange with this React use callback, and onChange is a value that is new every single render. It's an inline function right here. Now, to do this, one way we would have to take this onChange out, and we'd have to say const onChange, and we would have to like React use callback, and then we would have to make sure that we update this callback anytime that the input changes from the first one, and then that means that we're going to have to memoize this function itself. You can see it kind of forces a chain all the way back up to where we have to make sure we're memoizing every value that goes into that onChange handler. And honestly, I think that's a really good idea in most cases. But where you want to be able to use inline functions like this, there is a trick that can help you make these more usable without having to force memoization on everything. So the way that we can do that is, instead of locking this onChange function into this callback and trying to memoize it, we're going to use a ref. So we don't want to call the onChange function itself coming from this, because it will be locked in time from whenever set value is updated because of this React use callback. What we want to do is we want to call a ref, and we want to call the current value of that ref. Because what this is basically doing is it's almost like doing this. Back when we had classes, we could say this.onChange, right? Or this.something. Now, we were guaranteed that this whatever was always going to be up to date. But with hooks, there's closures around our values, especially when we're doing memoization, and it kind of freezes those values in time. So the way we can do that with hooks now is by using a ref. So first, let's create a ref up here. We're going to say const onChange ref equals React use ref. And then we want to set the ref value, so .current, to the onChange function that's coming through right here. And then anything that was using onChange, we want to use this onChange current instead. So what this means is that we're still locking this function in time. We're freezing this callback, right? When set value updates or changes, and it never will, because use state, the set value function that comes from use state, doesn't ever really change, and that's just straight out of the React docs. But the onChange value will, and it's going to change every single render. So every single render, we're just going to update this reference right here, so that the onChange ref current value inside of our onChange handler is going to be always referencing the latest version that we've given it right here. So it's almost like in a class we were saying like this.onChange equals onChange in a way. So it'll always be up to date. That way we don't have to worry about memoizing anything. So now when we say it was Fu, we'll change it to Tanner, and then we'll say Lindsley, and it's always up to date with Tanner. And if we change that to something funny like boom, baby, All right. So those are some little tips to use inline functions, like inline functions that normally would be created on every single render. You can put them into a ref and just update them on every render, and then reference that reference that ref anywhere in your code that you want to use the up-to-date version, the latest version of that value. And that's a good way around it. But clearly, if the situation calls for it, I think going for a memoized route would always be best. It just depends on the API you want to expose to your users of your hook. If you want to allow them to use inline functions, then you have to prepare for that like this. Or if you want to force them to send you immutable instances of functions so that you can do change detection or whatever, then you would have to memoize the on-change value and say, hey, any on-change value that you send me has to be, something that has been through use memo or use callback. So that's it. Thanks for tuning in really quick. Be sure to go check out my open source projects. GitHub.com/Tanner Lindsley. I've got a couple of good ones there. React Static is one that I've been working on lately, but probably the one I'm most excited about right now is React Table. We're upgrading React Table to version 7, and it's going to be all hook based, and it's a hook for building really fast and extensible data grids. So go check that out. And if you enjoy my open source work or my videos, you can go find me on Patreon. Help me build open source software and teach people how to use React on YouTube. So thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you later.